Are you staring at my breasts?
Welcome to The Wall. In today's video, we'll see how a single mother says that women are not to blame if the father turns out bad, another one advises on how to date her, and a single mother shares how her life improves after leaving her husband. Before we begin, we want to thank you for being here. Your support means a lot to us. If you like what you see, we invite you to subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up. We'd also love to hear about your experiences in the comments. Your engagement helps us grow and reach more people. Thank you for being part of our project. Let's get started.
Now, this is specifically for everyone on here who hates on single mums. Being a single mum is a flex, and you cannot convince me otherwise. It is hard enough being a parent when the two of you are together and living in the same household. Until you have done it on your own, you have no idea how hard it is. No, I am absolutely not complaining. I wouldn't change it for the world. What I really want to do is get rid of this stigma that single mothers have, that they're a failure, that they're a red flag, because they're not with the baby daddy anymore. When in actual fact, it's the complete opposite, because she's brave enough to do it all by herself. And that goes for single dads too. I could have stayed in my marriage, but where would I be now? Still crying myself to sleep every night. And as my daughter's getting older and older, she's paying more attention to the way her dad is treating me. And before anyone says, well, maybe you should have picked a better partner in the beginning, they're never like that in the beginning. To all my other mummies out there, single or not, I see you. You are doing an amazing job.
Brothers, if tomorrow I ask for a loan from the bank, spend it having fun in the streets and nightlife, and end up ruined with debt, is it my fault or the lender's fault for lending me the money? You could say it's wrong for the lender to be foolish enough to give me that money, and it's wrong for me to take that money to have fun knowing I won't be able to pay it back. That's how single mothers are. They choose the man with whom they want to have children, usually the classic Chad, a man who brings nothing to the table except his seed. This man, who is usually the love of their life and brings good genes to the table, they want to have their children with him. After this classic Chad leaves, they complain because the world doesn't accept their victim card. We all know it was their decision to have their children. They're old enough to go to protests against abortion, to shout, "My body, my choice," but not to accept that it was their choice to get pregnant by this man. Even though they don't see anyone blaming the man for this, because a man who is raising his children, usually if he chooses the woman with whom to have them, won't complain if the mother decides to abandon them tomorrow. He just gets to work and takes on his responsibility as a father without much fuss. But the woman has to shout to the rooftops that she is a victim. That's why I say responsibility is kryptonite for women.
One thing I don't play about is my mama. I knew when I originally posted the video, if anybody paid attention to it, that there might end up being some comments alluding to the fact that my mother had information about my paternity that she was not divulging to me at the time. My mom went through some seriously traumatic situations when she was younger. Situations that you and I would never understand. Situations that should have resulted with people being put underneath the jail. That coupled with her age, lack of maturity, coming from a small town, participating in recreational activity. I have no doubt that my mom has been honest with me through this entire process. The biggest reason, with all of those things set aside, is from the date of my conception even up into this day, my father has tormented the fuck out of her. Retrospectively, I can't imagine a universe where my mom would willingly participate in what transpired between her and my father. If it was an option to alleviate him from the picture, then I'm sure that's what she would have done. Then and now, I would not have any space to fault her for that.
In a video, we saw how this woman discovers that the man who raised her is not her father. She wants, after gaining fame with the story, to give her mother a makeover. The problem is that the mother pinned the pregnancy on her boyfriend, who was her father. She realized she wasn't his daughter now with the DNA test. There were indications that she wasn't the daughter of this man because her siblings are white, and she has more features like the child of an interracial couple. Still, the man raised her, supported her. He might not have done it with love, but he didn't shirk his responsibility. She portrays him as the villain when it was the mother who, supposedly, doesn't remember who she was with. At that time, the man was her boyfriend, so he must have been the father. You know the story, throwing the stone and hiding the hand. Cheating on my boyfriend with someone of another race, very common in this country. After I'm pregnant, I say it's from my boyfriend. Mr. Simps. Now she talks about how her mother was an unstable girl who suffered abuse. In short, her life was a mess. Like any woman who is a mess, she brought chaos into her father's life, and in the worst way, by pinning the child of Chad on him. Brothers, this story that a woman doesn't know who she got pregnant by is a lie. She knows how many men she's been with. It's better to cover her lies with, I have amnesia and don't remember, than to confess to the man she was with. But as I've always said in this country, the man, even with evidence in hand, has to fight to prove his innocence. Now she wants to portray him as the villain, but not the mother who couldn't be faithful. You can't make this crap up, brothers.
So let me tell you why it's so hard to date a single mom and to date while being a single mom. So I recently met this guy while I was out, met him in the wild. Everything was great. He was super cute. We were vibing. He got my number, and then we continued to talk afterwards. Now, the problem with this is I only have certain days that I can see someone. There might even be a week or two that goes by where I just cannot see you. And in the early stages of dating, that is very hard and detrimental to, your dating life, because if you can't keep a conversation going through, text messages or phone calls, FaceTimes, whatever, I'm going to get bored. And I know people say, you really shouldn't text that much early on, but I have no choice, unfortunately, because I have every Friday night free. My daughter is with her dad every Friday night. But I can't expect that people are going to be free those days. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. So like I said, maybe a week or two will go by where I can't see you. And for me, in the early stages of dating, I am not going to get a babysitter. I'm not going to ask my mom. I'm not going to do any of that for someone who I don't feel is worth it. And I know that sounds harsh, but I don't know you. I'm not taking time away from my daughter. Later on, if we decide that things are going well and we really get along, I don't have a problem getting a babysitter, but then it's a no from me. So back to the guy. I found that our conversations were just very lackluster. He was very surface level. It was pretty much, hey, how was work? How was your day? Every day. And I just feel like as adults, babe, our days are the same. I wake up, I get my daughter ready for school, give her breakfast, drive her to school, go to work, come home, have dinner, bath, bedtime. It is a revolving door of the same day. And I think most adults can relate to that statement. So if you're not trying to ask me questions, getting to know me, this, that, and the third, I'm bored. I don't want to talk anymore. So I had to tell him, listen, you're great, but this isn't going to work out. I need a ping pong back and forth kind of conversation. And if I don't have that, for me personally, it's just not going to work out. Some people like that. I personally do not. So the search continues. And just know if you're going to try to pursue or date a single mother, this is how it's going to be. So.
Dating a single mother is a bad idea, plain and simple. This woman will never see you as a priority because her children are her priority, and that's valid. Secondly, you have to understand that there will be 3 people in that bed, you, her, and the father of her child. This means that the seed's owner, the Chad, will be watching to make sure you take good care of his seed. Furthermore, it's complicated to make time for yourself with this woman, let alone maintain her interest. Thirdly, you'll have to get along with her children, who typically resent the stepfather because, let's be totally honest, no one wants to see another man doing their mom's job, especially if your mom has terrible taste like a classic Chad. This woman isn't saying anything bad. She's simply telling you what it would be like to try to win her over instead of her making an effort to find a beta provider. She expects you to put in the effort for her. The problem is, you're not as much of a prize as you might have been before, and secondly, you come with baggage, so it's double the effort to deal with you. Brothers, avoid chaos in your life.
Truth is, when you're dating a girl that's very, very independent, she's probably always going to say no anytime you ask her, does she need anything? And as toxic as you may think that is, we all have our baggage. And then when you are in a relationship, you work through that trauma with that person if that's the person that you decided to be with. So if you want to help her to stop being so prideful in that sense, And yes, she needs to be working on her trauma too if she is overly independent. I have to say things for clarity. But anyways, if you feel like you want to do something for her, just do it. Take that initiative, because when she sees you taking that initiative, it'll make her more comfortable and more trusting, and she'll feel like she can depend on you a little bit more. And just for clarity, independence is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. But too much of anything can become a bad thing.
When I hear a woman say she carries a lot of baggage, it means she's been through several chads, which indicates she's been on an emotional carousel. This leads to one of two things. Either she's very bossy or controlling, or she's extremely jealous and makes a problem out of everything. Many of these women who have been with these men should first go to therapy because they need to detox from the chad in order to form a healthy bond with another man. But many don't do that. That's why when you get involved with a woman like this, you're only going to suffer because she'll make you pay for all the bad things the chad did to them. These very independent women tend to have a lot of masculine energy. They're used to doing everything on their own, so you won't be able to lead in the relationship because there will always be this power struggle. You'll have all the responsibility with her but never the leadership. Unfortunately, responsibility without authority simply amounts to slavery.
Today, a guy on TikTok asked why, after a woman gets divorced, why she starts to look better, why she loses weight, and why didn't she put all that effort in when they were still married to them? Go ahead and state your answer. I'm going to tell you mine. When I was married, I had 2 young children, and one has special needs, and I had these 2 dogs, and no fence, and a large house, and a husband, and I just was overwhelmed to the point where there was no respite. And there was a mom group every maybe like month or 2, but there was no respite, and I was worn out. And one morning, the guy that was coming in to put the underground fence in and then train the dogs, I threw on some sweats. I barely got any, my hair was all crazy. And I opened the door, and I've got one kid on my arm, and I've got another one that's in the bathroom needing help. And I was like, I'm so sorry, I'm a mess right now, but come in and, you can get started with the dogs. And he said, you know how you can tell the alpha dog? Now I get it, this guy trains dogs for a living. And so this was the best metaphor he could come up with, although somewhat backhanded, but I got it. He said, you see, the alpha dog is in charge of all the dogs. And the most stress and the most pressure is on them for survival, for providing food, for finding the means for it, for doing all of it. They don't get a break. They just go. That part I related to. Not the alpha dog so much, but I understood where he was going. And while things got revealed in time about the man that I was married to and why I was not going to allow things to go on that were being done to me in the absence of my knowing they were going on, was the catalyst. But after that separation, I started to get weekends and time for myself. What? Not just like maybe a day every other month or something. And then reassessing my, the things I like to do and people that I started to become better friends with. And pretty soon I was in a career after some time and thriving and finding myself. And the thought of giving up all that work I put in to allow that to happen again kind of stops me in my tracks, because I value my peace. I just value my peace now. But it also kind of reminds me of when Cher's mom looked at her and said, Cher, why don't you just marry a rich man and settle down? And Cher looked at her mom and she said, Mom, I am a rich man. Well, Mom, I am an alpha dog. I don't need another one. I run this pack just fine on my own. It's taken that long.
You know what also happens? Many women, when they're married, hate the idea of staying at home. They're bothered by the thought of doing anything for their husband. I know it's not easy raising children, but it's not the worst task in the world either. If you can manage your time with chores, you can have more time for yourself. What bothered you is the idea of being at home, having to take care of the man. Once they leave, they start doing things for themselves because they have to do them. They don't have anyone to complain to. But there were solutions they surely do now that they're divorced. But when married, they don't want to do anything. That's why it bothers me when women say everything is the man's fault. It's the man's fault if you gain 30 pounds. It's the man's fault if you can't do your chores. It's the man's fault if you have to deal with your feelings. It's the man's fault for every complaint they have because they can't take responsibility for their own situations. They have to blame the man and make him feel miserable for every situation they're in. And what happens to the man? Taking care of a house, supporting 2 children and a wife, having to work day in and day out, dealing with work situations. The worst part is coming home to someone who only wants to tell you how their life is hell because of you. And beware if they don't give you that crap about postpartum depression or start feeling like nobody loves them, or they get those weird crises when they have children. Because guess who will also be to blame? The man, clearly. That's why you see when a man gets divorced, his life starts to get better because it's a heavy burden to always have to endure someone else's miseries, especially their emotional situations. We've reached the end of the video, but before we go, the questions are for you. What do you think about dating single mothers? Have you ever been divorced? How are you doing now after the divorce? If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. Your support means the world to us and motivates us to create more content. Stay tuned for the next exciting video from The Wall.